Okay, good. So I'm Sylvia Dana with eXp Realty, and we just decided to get together and have a little discussion about appraisal gap guarantees specifically. We've got two guest speakers to help us out, and I'm not going to say their names correctly, so they're going to help me. It's just like my flaw in myself. I could never say people's names. So we've got Blaine Feyen. Did I say it right? I did. And what's the name of your company, Blaine?
Yeah, anyway, its last name is Feyen, but you were doggone close. So I've been called much worse, so I'll take Feyen all day long.
All right, good.
And it's Real Value Group, or Real Value Appraisal.
Okay, fantastic. And you also have a great Facebook group for helping realtors.
Yeah, thank you.
Helping, what was it called? Appraisers helping real estate
West Michigan real estate agents.
And of course, you know, other agents too, but West Michigan, we're here.
It's almost up to 1,000 people now, and there's agents from all over Michigan. We've let some in. There's great lenders in there and some other appraisers. There's about 20 appraisers in there as well.
Wow, you know, it's awesome. It is really helpful. And then we have Josh Nawrot, who I never can say his last name either. Nawrot.
You had it right the first time. It's Nawrot.
Oh,
like
Nawrot.
N-O-R-O-T, Nawrot.
It's my flaw. It's my flaw, and I'm sorry, but I'm trying so hard. Okay, Josh, and he's from Northern Mortgage, and you know, I invited him because he was so smart. Because, well, first of all, Josh is pretty smart. He's great at follow up and checking on people. But he sent a video. Was it yesterday? I think about like some creative things you can do as a lender to help your buyer present a stronger offer when it comes to the appraisal gap guarantee. And so thank you, Josh, for sending that. And he's also here in West Michigan, but this is going to apply to any agent in Michigan, buyers in Michigan, but probably all over the country to some degree, all of those of us that use appraisal gap guarantees. So thank you so much. So what I'm curious about is if you have any specific questions about the appraisal gap guarantee, please put that in the chat if there's some burning questions. I'm going to shut up. And what I would like to do is I'd first like Blaine to kind of describe, as from an appraiser's point of view, what the appraisal gap guarantee is, and some tips for us to start thinking about it and kind of lead the direction there. And then we'll kind of use that. And then I want Josh to give his perspective of the appraisal gap guarantee, what it is, how realtors can use it, and how he's using it for lenders. And then we'll kind of work it in from there. And we're going to focus our conversation on the appraisal gap guarantee. Now, towards the end, if we have time and we feel like we've exhausted that, if you guys have other questions for Blaine or for Josh, we can do that. But we're focusing on the appraisal gap guarantee because that's what everybody really felt that they needed the most. Okay, fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right, again, put your questions in the chat, and I'm going to shut up, and I'll help you. You know, I might chime in if anybody needs to do something, but oh, and then Cheryl's here. Yay, Cheryl. So Cheryl Miller, she is the designated managing broker for eXp Realty. Oh, and I love your hair. It looks great. And Cheryl, you're the one who really wanted us to come together today and do this. Can you kind of explain your concerns or why you thought this was important to have us do this today?
Well, I think it's important because a lot of agents, especially in this market, are trying every single thing they can now on their offers, and appraisal gap clauses, we'll call it, is becoming at the top of the list right now. And from what I'm hearing, attorneys are actually looking at this now because sometimes these offers are not put together correctly, and the buyer seems to think that the appraisal gap, what have you, supersedes their down payment. That's how extreme it's been getting. And so I think that we're going to have to start using worksheets now to explain to a buyer, this is what an appraisal gap is, and this is how much money you're potentially looking at, and here's your down payment, here's your closing costs. Those things are not happening. And I don't really want agents practicing appraisal gap clauses when they don't understand it themselves.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Okay, and so those of you who are new agents, because we probably have a couple new agents on, just a quick summary of the appraisal gap guarantee is, and then I'll shut up, I promise, is, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm gonna offer you $200,000 on your home. And by the way, if it doesn't appraise for $200,000, I've got $10,000 cash that I'll bring to the table. So that I can cover different. So that way, if it only appraises for 190, you're still going to get up to $200,000 because I'm going to cover that difference. So that's what an appraisal gap guarantee is technically. So I will shut up now. And Blaine, where'd you go?
I'm right here.
Fantastic. All right. So Blaine, tell us all about how the appraisal gap guarantee works for you as an appraiser, what that means to you and what you think about it as an appraiser.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on. I'm honored to be on with Josh as well. Great lender, and all the great realtors. I see a bunch of friends in here, so it's good to see everybody on and everybody getting educated. Tough market we're all in. It's you guys are fighting really, really hard to get deals done, and I feel your pain quite often when I'm talking with agents and lenders. They'll say, "Gosh, I have sympathy for the appraiser," and I think, "Gosh, I don't know why." I mean, you guys have it really, really tough. You guys are putting together offer after offer after offer, and they're not winning. And so thus the escalation clause is born, thus the appraisal guarantee clause is born, and who knows what new clause is coming down the pike to get creative and win deals. So from the appraisal standpoint, of course, we love to see Fannie Mae requires, it's written right into Fannie Mae's rules that the appraiser is to analyze and summarize. Those are the two words they use. Analyze and summarize all contracts for sale on a purchase transaction. So not talking refis here, we're talking purchase transactions. So it helps to know, and we will ask quite often, the question we will get from people is, well, why does the appraiser get the contract? Shouldn't it just be kind of a pure process where they go into the market and they just tell me what the pure market value is? The problem with that concept is that the purchase agreement is a very important piece of data for an appraiser. Anytime you have a meeting of the minds, it's important for the appraiser to analyze that and to take that into consideration. If we just go into the market blind and we find whatever the comparable sales are in the market, that might be okay. But anytime you have a willing buyer and a willing seller, which is part of the definition of market value from Fannie Mae, it behooves the appraiser to know that and to analyze that, because it is one of the pieces of information and data that help us kind of see where the market is going and what things are doing. The appraisal gap guarantee, Sylvia, as you just said, is just that. It is a clause that says we guarantee we will pay X dollars above the appraised value, typically when they're well written, up to a certain sale price. So when an appraiser sees that, now I'm using the term loosely, I can't speak for all appraisers, but myself and our team, when we see that, of course, we understand that was probably one of the pieces of leverage that helped get that deal done. Not the only piece, but probably part of it. We also understand that appraisals are backward looking, meaning we can't project into the future. We can see, we have to comment on market conditions, whether the market is increasing, stable, or declining. In my opinion, if there's any appraisers on this call, all appraisers should be marking increasing market. There should be no stable market being written in there. They should all be marking under 3 months for marketing time. There should be no 3 to 6 months marketing time. Everything is being sold within 8 hours, if that, sometimes, before broadcast. So market is most definitely increasing, and appraisals, the best comp I have is typically the one that sold yesterday. We've got current listings, we've got pending sales. Now, sometimes what we will do is if we see that the best comparable sale is pending, quite often what good appraisers will do is they'll stop everything. We will call on that pending sale and say, hey, can you tell me when it's closing? And oh, by the way, can you share with me what it's pending at? Because quite often in this market, it's pending higher than what the list price is. And if we know that that's going to be a great sale to help tell our story, we'll then call our lender and say, hey, we've got this pending sale. This is really going to help us tell the story. What are our rate locks? Are we going to blow them? Can we wait a week? Can we wait 2 weeks? Those kinds of things. And if we can wait, we'll put that deal on hold. We'll wait till that pending sale closes. We'll pop that in as a closed sale. And again, to help tell the story. Not our job isn't to support a sale price. It's to tell a story. The lender is looking for collateral support, and the appraisal is part of that piece of collateral support. So if there's something going on in the market, it helps for the appraiser to be able to tell that story. So that's essentially the appraisal gap guarantee, or the appraisal gap clause, and how appraisers look at it. Now, I will tell you that anytime we see an appraisal gap clause, we understand a couple things going on. One, we understand, again, that it's a piece that helps get the deal done. Two, it is basically the buyer saying, we understand we might be, not definitely are, but we might be paying above the current market value as of today, but we are willing to do that because we anticipate the market to keep climbing. Again, it's not in every case, but there is an assumption. Anytime you see an escalation clause, anytime you see an appraisal gap clause, there is an assumption that they're basically saying to the world, we're willing to pay over what the appraiser says, and we have to assume the appraisal is the current market value as of, well, yesterday anyway, and we're willing to pay above that. So important for agents to know that when you write that in, it is sending that message that they kind of know they're paying above market value, although the market value could catch up in a day, could catch up in a week. So
what I've
that's
been really interesting, Blaine, about this myself is that appraisal gap guarantees, the stronger the appraisal gap guarantee, and the price point of the offer, that seems like a stronger offer than just a straight up cash deal right now, which is crazy to me, but it's true. But thank you for that. And we're going to get back, so Cheryl mentioned she's talking about the legal aspects, and we're going to get back to that if we can. But I want Josh now to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his perspective as a lender with the appraisal gap guarantee, and kind of how he's working it and things he's helping his clients with.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me out today. Once again, I see a lot of great agents in this room, a lot of heavy hitters. Thank you so much for just taking out the little bit of time to get a little bit more information on this. Agents, you guys and gals are working so hard out there, hustling contracts, bidding, just clawing, trying to do everything we can to win for our clients. And I absolutely love that. As a lender, we're fighting just as hard, trying to, create space and, close deals quick and make the strongest offers possible. So appraisal gap, this kind of snuck up on the scene here. If you look back over the last 5 years, every year, like, something gets added. Like Blaine was saying, like, what is it going to be next year? I remember last year and the year before, escalation clauses were really big. Before that, people were like, what's an escalation clause? I mean, who remembers the day that, they had a buyer, they're putting down their down payment, they're putting down their closing costs. And that was like, I mean, we were singing the hallelujah chorus, like, oh my gosh, we got ourselves a real good buyer. Now it's like, oh my gosh, you need a down payment, you need closing costs, you need gap. And depending upon the loan program, you might need a fourth bucket of money, 4 buckets of money reserves. So we're really encouraging all clients, hey, let's talk about each one of these individual buckets of money and what they need. So getting back to the escalation clause, the appraisal gap makes sense. If you remember, last year and the year before, people would write insane offers. We saw this. We saw clients do this. A house listed at 300, they would write 350 or 400, knowing very well that the deal will rebalance about 2 weeks in after the appraisal comes in. So they shoot for the moon, and the buyers knew this. I mean, they had these conversations. The agents knew this. They had these conversations that, all right, we win the bid up here. Sellers get super excited. Oh my gosh, 400 grand. And then the appraisal comes in and the deal gets rebalanced. So the appraisal gap makes sense. The appraisal gap, love it, hate it, indifferent. I wrote down appraisal gap is the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the appraisal gap is ultimately the muscle behind the offer. If you're going to write $1 above list price in a bidding war, backing it with cash makes sense. Now, from a lender standpoint, it's getting more tricky. We're seeing appraisals come in all over the place. We just had a deal situation. Blaine, I love that you and your group are calling pendings. We literally had a sale in Alger, listed at 275, pended at 300 with an appraisal gap. Appraiser called and said, hey, the appraisal's coming in low here. We're not sure what we can do. Or the appraisal did come in low. And then we found out that there was a home that pended and then closed about a week later that sold for 330. So we had the appraiser recertify the report. We had to pay for kind of a new appraisal to get a freshened update on that. And then the low appraisal ended up being just fine. So if you're a real estate agent, if you're listing, if you're a buying agent, knowing the comps that are around you, knowing the pending sales that could help are super vital. It's helpful for the buyer and their cash position. It's helpful for the seller in maximizing their position. But appraisal gap, from what we see here, is here to stay. The only thing that's kind of spooky about appraisal gap is really helping the client understand, because the deal's moving so fast. We're talking all this lingo, agents are talking the lingo, and I feel like the clients can get lost here. I love the idea that Cheryl said of a spreadsheet, where clients are like, hey, here's your down payment, here's your closing costs, and then here's the appraisal gap on this. Really understanding their cash positions, because remember, in a market that's fast and furious, what happens 2 or 3 years later when things change? Lawsuits. So I've been lending for 18 years. I saw the early 2000s gold rush. We fought through the crash of 2008, 2009, 2010. We've seen the last 10, 11 years. We saw, last year what it was, but we've got to keep in mind, when we're in the market, we think this is going to last for forever, when really we need to be protecting ourselves. So as lenders, we're closing the loop going, hey, when there's appraisal gap, hey, I understand the sale price is this. I'm buying it at this, as kind of a cover, your hind end parts movement. Because down the road, if the market shifts and if it cools off and if there's a price decrease, who knows what's going to happen? No idea to predict the future. I'm not a Debbie Downer. I think the market's going to continue to be healthy, but those are conversations we need to have. Is it smart to have a $50,000 appraisal gap when the client's going to be moving in 2 years? I don't know. That client could be underwater. And then a last point before I turn this back to you guys here, we just helped a client do this over the weekend. So clients like, Josh, here's my budget. My budget's $50,000. Cram down payment, cram closing costs, cram gap, everything into that budget. We're really good. The top loan officers in our market are really good at working with clients' budgets. So we basically took him on this purchase, and instead of putting 20% down, we took 5% of that money and put it up for appraisal gap, which is about $15,000, $16,000. Now, if for whatever reason we need to exercise that appraisal gap, instead of 20% down, he's going to be 15% down with really two options. He's going to have a fuzz of PMI for a very short period of time, or we can buy him out of the PMI and he's still going to have those great options. So smart loan officers in the market know how to work with the client's budget, work with the client's cash position, so that way they're not having to bring in all this extra money to close, that we can work within that bucket and have a successful transaction.
So Josh, I have a question. So let's say we have a buyer in a perfect world, goes to the mortgage lender and already has his pre-approval to go looking at houses. And we all know houses last on the market about 37 seconds right now. So now we get into this, yep, I want to make an offer and I'm going to offer 10,000 over the asking price because I want to win this bid, so to speak. And now all of a sudden everything changes. Buyer forgot to calculate in his head, well, now my closing costs are going to be higher. Now my down payment's higher. And this is where the agent needs to come in and work with the lender together as a team to say, okay, here's the spreadsheet. This is what it's going to look like, because they had to make that offer in that 37 seconds. But they didn't calculate anything when they made that offer. Now we have a legal binding offer sitting here, signed, executed, and we run into trouble because now the numbers changed. And of course, buyer wants to back out now because they didn't, foresee those extra costs.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a great point. making sure your clients are with good, trusted lenders is the number one thing that you can do. We share this with our top real estate agents that we work with every single day. And write this down. Unless you are cash, this is a great conversation to have with the buyer, unless you are an all cash buyer, who you're pre-approved with absolutely matters. There's a handful of really good lenders in town. Who you're pre-approved with absolutely matters. And this really goes into making sure that lender is covered. I call it 3 buckets of money: down payment, making sure you have enough, closing costs, and gap. So we, in order for our pre-approval letter to go out there, not everybody has the same high standard. We need documents in, and we need buckets of money verified. If my name goes on that pre-approval letter, it has got to be solid. We are not messing around. And our pre-approvals are based on a number and below. So if they're looking at 300,000 and below, we've already covered the worst case scenario figures, not all your pre-approvals between 200 and 300. Because you're right, Cheryl, the figures at 200 are much different than the figures at 300.
Right.
And the payments that we are calculating are at that max pre-approval and below. On top of that, we're including taxes, insurance, potential PMI, everything. So we're not giving them the teaser online payment, cookie cutter. Oh, hey, your payment's $1,200. Oh, but it's really $1,800 with everything. We're giving them worst case scenario and below.
Josh, Laura had a good point. She said, if you put the 20% down, isn't there a good chance the appraisal could be waived? And she'd rather see that as a listing agent.
Yes. So this has come up a lot. Here is the scoop on appraisal waivers. We call appraisal waivers a bonus. I know that there are some lenders and agents that are leading with the appraisal waiver, but basically here's what's going on with appraisal waivers. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been data collecting, data mining for a long time. Every appraisal that is complete has an SSR, risk score, bed bath counts, square footage counts. It collects that data similar to like artificial intelligence, Amazon, even your social media platforms use AI. You talk about a foosball table, guess what's going to show up in your feed? Now, because I mentioned foosball table, my cell phone's sitting here, guess what's going to show up in my feed? Foosball tables. So for appraisal waivers, it really depends on the borrower's risk in that loan, debt to income ratio, and is there enough data collected around that house in that neighborhood? Now, this doesn't happen often. We've seen a lot of appraisal waivers. Every once in a while, they get lost, meaning the underwriter reruns the income, they update the assets, they tweak the sales price, whatever, and the appraisal waiver can evaporate. So then comes in a really interesting position where I've seen on the Facebook chatter page where they're like, hey, if somebody waives inspections and an inspector shows up and then the homeowner denies them access, I thought about that even on the appraisal, game where, hey, we had an appraisal waiver, we lost it, and now we need to get an appraiser through the house and the seller might be unwilling. So appraisal waivers, treat them like a bonus. Do not ever lead with them. If a lender leads with them, I would be super, super cautious. We always say, hey, we have an appraisal waiver right now. After the file gets through underwriting, when all the checks and balances are done, the underwriter does all their, precision surgical cutting. I can't talk today. Then we'll typically scream it from the mountaintops going, hey guys, as of this moment, moving forward, the appraisals waived, we should not need any. But I would not lead with appraisal waivers right now.
That's good. Okay, so
good to know.
Cheryl, as far as the appraiser's point of view, let's, you had I want to make sure we discuss it because that's your big concern. And we don't have a real estate attorney on, but, and neither of these guys are attorneys, and we're going to acknowledge that. But Cheryl, what question do you have for Blaine as far as, what we're looking at? And he kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but what we're looking at for few months coming down the road or a couple of years coming down the road. Josh mentioned it too, when it comes to these appraisal gap guarantees and what we're looking at legally. Do you have a specific question or that you want to ask Blaine?
Well, I just want to make it clear that I have noticed this lately with buyers just backing out. Of course, that creates a legal situation. I'm not licensed to practice law, so I'm not going to give advice. Of course, I tell you, contact your legal counsel, right? So I see that happening. And then also in the appraisal world, I'm wondering what the comps are going to look like 2 years from now, because these market values are so overflated because of the low inventory. How's it going to impact that? And then also an agent asked me recently, I'm not sure if I had this conversation with Sylvia or not. Someone asked me, I'm not an appraiser either, but how do you formulate solar shingles on a house?
Great questions. Yeah, tough ones. So I'll go from last question to the first.
Okay.
Solar is really, really tough in Michigan. There's two big issues. First and foremost, one is the solar leased, is it purchased? Quite often we'll run into deals where the solar is leased and that lease has to carry over to, Josh has probably run into these as well, and I know agents have, but if it's leased, there's no value. It adds nothing to the house. Even when it's purchased, however, because it's not common, we used to get this question a lot with, say, metal roofs. Metal roofs have become popular and people would ask, well, I just spent 25 grand on my metal roof. Doesn't that add some value? The problem is appraisals are based on available market data and numbers we can extract from market data. And anytime you're trying to extract numbers from data, you want as much data sampling as possible. And if there's only one or two houses in a 2 square mile radius that have data on a metal roof, it's really tough to extract an adjustment and say, oh, that adds 10 grand more. Same thing with solar. Solar is still not super popular around the country, and certainly not popular in areas where we might not be able to extract the energy from those solar panels that you would say in sunnier climes, or where you can make use of the solar stuff. So solar in this side of the country is always going to be tough to extract value from. There are some calculations we can do, but then I'd turn it over to Josh and say, well, have you seen where underwriters are accepting adjustments for solar? Because typically I think that's where it gets tossed, as the underwriter says, we don't see enough market data or support for the adjustments to really apply it or agree with that value. So solar, just plan on it being tough. It's going to be an issue. I'm sorry, Cheryl, what was your other question about appraisal guarantees? Oh, values on these comps. So yeah, this is a very real issue. Because appraisals are always backward looking, and because economies are like naval battleships in that they don't turn quickly. They move slowly. And although this market has ramped up quite rapidly and we're seeing some crazy stuff go on, at some point all markets stabilize, and then at some point all markets change their curve. We can see it. I mean, Josh said he's been through it. I've been through it. I've been doing this 25 years now between real estate lending and appraisal. And we see the ups and downs, just normal cycles. We don't have to use words like crash. We can just say stabilize. So when a market stabilizes, that means it flattens, and then it might actually start to come back down. Well, when it does start to come back down, you've got all these all these sales in the market that if we were to use that, grant that word overinflated to be applied to these, those are all the new comps in the market. So could mean even after a stabilization of the market, we've got really good comps now to use for the next year because they all, in a sense, oversold, but those are the comps in the market. So that will keep things from dropping drastically, at least for a year, while we still have those as comparable sales. Hopefully that makes sense.
Made perfect sense to me. And real estate is like the stock market to me. It's going to level off. It's going to go up and down.
Yeah.
It's the same game, really.
Yep.
I didn't have any other questions. I don't know if anybody in the audience does, but those are the things we are seeing right now is that appraisal gap.
Well, and I'll just, sorry, Cheryl, I'll throw this out there while some questions, if people want to throw them out, start coming in. I'm watching the chat too. With these inflated prices and the appraisal gaps and all of this stuff. I mean, I just had one 2 weeks ago, list price 400, sale price 498, appraisal gap $100,000. I mean, these are people that they have cash laying around and they're willing to pay. Does it mean that house is worth $500,000? Well, it was to that buyer. And obviously the seller accepted it. But from Fannie Mae's standpoint, there's more to the definition of market value than just what a buyer and a seller are willing to pay and accept. They have some other standards. So now that's a new comp in the market. What the appraiser never gets to see on the MLS, the appraiser never gets to see what the house appraised for. And we never get to see those parameters of the sale. Like how much was the appraisal gap guarantee? How much did the buyer kick in? All of that. So all we get to see in the MLS is the final sale price and things like seller concessions and the type of financing and whatnot. So when we see that comparable sale pop up in the market and we see, holy cow, listed for 400 and sold for 498. Wow, that's a big jump. But all we get to see is final sale price. So there is going to be a little more due diligence going on by appraisers, or should be, where we start calling and asking a lot more questions. Hey, I see this sold for 498. I see it listed for 400. Can you give me any more details about it? Because we want to kind of know, was this an outlier sale? Was this the median? Was this part of a group? What went on with that? And it behooves the appraiser. We're the investigators on the deal, and we're the ones who are trying to make sense and write some narrative and some commentary on, here's what's going on in the market. Here's what happened with the subject property, but here's what's going on in the market, because one house doesn't make a market. So we're going to be doing, I can see it already, we're going to be doing a lot more work and a lot more due diligence, just trying to gather information about each and every one of these sales.
I think you're going to be doing a whole lot of CSIing, because the new construction as well jumped in the last week, 33%.
Well, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Josh.
So Blaine, I get this question. I mean, we were kind of fighting through that low appraisal. The deal ended up closing. It ended up going really well. And the listing agent, who was very, very nice, said, hey, Josh, should I print off and show the appraiser all 27 offers above list price? Blaine, can you lean into that? Does that help?
Yeah.
Does that hurt? What's an appraiser's take on, hey, I listed here, it's sold up here, here's all the offers?
Yep. Great question. Great question. And we get this all the time. Anytime I'm talking to the agents, that is a normal question, is should I share all that stuff? What should I share? And if there's, again, I see some appraisers on this as well. So I would say, yes, we do want to see that, because again, all of that speaks to market conditions and market data. Now, I'll tell you why it really matters, Josh. A lot of the agents think it matters because it usually helps support the higher sale price, because a lot of times what they'll say is, look, we had 27 offers, which speaks to scarcity and demand, and we didn't even take the highest one. That's normally what they'll say. So it kind of is supposed to plant the seed like, oh, well, this must be a reasonable offer then if you didn't even take the highest one. Here's what normally happens though. Because one house does not make a market, if I were to ask a whole room of agents, who determines market value? And I start off my talks with this question. You all know what the answer is. Everybody says the same thing. It's either one of two things. They'll either say, well, the buyer does. It's beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Value is in the eye of the offerer. Or they'll say buyer and seller determine what market value is. And they are not wrong in saying that. So then if we take that point of view and we say, well, buyer and seller really kind of move the market, and they determine, and you have this offer, let's take my example of $400,000 list, $498 sale price. Well, they did have 18 other offers that ranged from $410 all the way up to $498. Well, that gives me 17 other reasons to say, here's what the rest of the market thought your house was worth. You have one that says it's worth $498. They just were the lucky ones, or the ones willing to throw the most cash at it. But we had one at $410, three at $425, one at $430, one at $440. So that's all market data saying the house is worth something in here. It's never just worth what the final winner of the deal is willing to pay. It's usually worth somewhere in the middle, and look at all these offers that say what it was worth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big conversations that we're having with our clients, one, it's no longer just a pre-approval anymore. We are deep diving in. We are going deeper than we ever have. We're taking more time with our clients than we ever have. I cringe when clients like, hey, I filled out something online at this certain company and here's my letter. That means nobody has taken the time or the due diligence. As real estate agents too, make sure your clients are coming in from trusted, vetted lenders, especially in this market. There's so many buyers. Yes, we're in 2021, but there's so many buyers that were impacted, sellers too, by 2020, income issues, credit issues, even forbearance issues that we're still seeing in our market right now, that if they skipped a few payments last year, that now could be coming back to haunt them. We're seeing the mortgage forbearance thing come up with second liens on title work. Make sure you're reading your title work. There's all kinds of stuff rolling out post-pandemic that we are now just getting our bearings on. And the CARES Act was pushed through so fast that we're now reading all the unintended consequences. So take time with your client to understand where they were, what they've been through, and where they're going is so vital. Getting on with trusted lenders is so vital because there's so many pitfalls, and that's why we're seeing deals. And I see this on the GRAR, chatter page where deals are blowing up in the 11th hour. Guys, gals, that is devastating. In a back-to-back market where there is dominoes lined up so tight that there's not even air between them. If one derails, it can mess up a whole chain of dominoes. So make sure that you guys are the quarterbacks. The real estate agents are the quarterbacks. You're directing the plays, you're throwing the passes, and it's really important to direct those clients, unless they're cash, to, like I said, trusted, vetted sources. Blaine, kind of a second thing that I've seen here too, conversations that we're having, sometimes we'll get this question as lenders like, Josh, what should I offer on this property? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then I tell the story that houses are listed low, median, market value, and high. And I said, you have to go back to your agent to really formulate your game plan, put together your offer, and move forward. Now, Blaine, can you lean into this? Because we've seen a little bit of this earlier in the year, not so much right now, but where houses are purposely listed low. Mm-hmm. They want to gather, as many offers as they can. We saw this. It was a 250 house listed at 219. And, can you lean into that? Like, I remember calling that agent back and saying, hey, you probably want to put together like a marketing letter explaining your marketing position. This is a 250 all-day Jenison house, and it's listed at 219. Put together a marketing letter outlining your tactic and your game plan moving forward. Blaine, does that help you as the appraiser? I've even seen some of those now included in appraisal reports as kind of a dot the I, cross the T measure of the marketing letter. Hey, here's where, the median market is. We, our game plan with their sellers, we ultimately wanted to list low, gather a big net of buyers, sell up here. Blaine, can you lean into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, I love the idea of a marketing letter. Sometimes where we'll see it is actually in the marketing comments on the MLS, where it says deliberately listed low to encourage activity or whatever. Because the appraiser always gets to see the listing history. On a side note, by the way, we know that sometimes there's a tactic to change the list price to whatever the sale price was at some point, as if it's going to fool somebody. It doesn't. We get to see the whole listing history. And Fannie Mae requires that we put 12 months of listing history in the report. So if it went from 219 to 250 to 300 or whatever, we put that whole listing history in there. Fannie Mae can see it. But yes, if we see a 219 and we know it's 250 all day long, instantly it's going to trigger something in my brain. What's wrong with this house? And I'm going to start making calls like, why 219? I'm going to see the sale price was way up there, but I'm going to think, was this just, did they not do a CMA or what? And I'll start calling. So anything that can head that off, a marketing letter, comments in the marketing remarks that says, look, we know what we're doing. We deliberately listed it below to get activity going. Absolutely speak to your methodology, because that's exactly what the appraiser has to do. A good appraisal is one where the methodology and the rationale is clearly explained to the reader of the report. Josh can look at it, and although we don't write appraisals for agents, we do it for the lender. The lender is always our client. We want to make them understandable. It's the charge of the appraiser to put together a document that is non-misleading. That is what USPAP says, is your appraisal cannot be misleading. So we're trying to be non-misleading, but us, good appraisers that work with us and there's some good appraisers that are in the call today. We're all trying to be really, really clear in how we chose the comps we chose, why we chose them, the difference between listing and sale price. We're trying to write up this whole story to put this whole puzzle together so that the reader of the report, whether it's Josh, the underwriters, the investors who end up buying the loan later on, they can look through that document and go, it's really clear what they did. We understand why. They made really clear what the listing situation was. Like Josh said, if there's a marketing letter, we put that in as kind of an evidence of what the listing agent was thinking. We just then summarize it, and we can explain, here's why it was listed where it was listed below market value. Here's why it sold so much higher than list price. Important to have that info for sure.
Blaine,
Yes, we just got a question in here. Sorry, go ahead, Sylvia.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so Laura, great question. So Laura asked a question, is there any truth to the rumor that Fannie and Freddie are asking appraisers to help put the brakes on rising prices? I'll address this from the lending standpoint. I'd love to hear Blaine's aspect. So from a lender standpoint, the answer is no. Fannie and Freddie are not asking people to put on the brakes. Fannie and Freddie are like Amazon. They are data collectors. They will risk every report on a scale of 1 being fast pass all the way up to 5, where if an appraisal report gets a 5, that is a high risk score. It is additional underwriting required. This is where the underwriter might ask the appraiser for additional comps, explanations, and things like that. Once again, choosing a great local lender is vital. Our underwriters sit in Granville. They know houses list here and sell for the moon right now. So if you have a lender and they have a branch office here, but their underwriters are in Texas, they may not understand what is going on in Midwest Michigan. So they might be asking for more comps or telling their appraisers to chill out. Blaine, you might be able to lean in on this a little bit here too, but if you're working with a certain lender and they are, constantly going back to you for more comps, more explanation, do you start to chill out a little bit on value?
Great question. To address the Fannie Freddie point, have not heard one thing. I'm a national appraiser coach. I got students all around the country. We like to think we're up on things. Have never heard that rumor actually. And I can't imagine Fannie and Freddie doing that. But if it's somewhere out there, it's going to cross our desk at some point. But I have not heard that. As far as revision requests, it's a great question. I wouldn't necessarily say it helps. It makes us put the brakes on valuations. What it does help us do is shore up every future report where we're trying to anticipate what other revision requests going to be. And so we're putting more data in, we're putting more comps in, we're putting more explanation in. In some cases we're maybe even going lighter on some of the adjustments that we used to adjust for, because we're seeing, for example, and this might speak to Jane asked a question, please touch on the top 3 things a potential seller can do to increase the value of the house. It's a great question, but I would say, and no offense to Jane, that's almost a throwback question to a year or 2 ago, because there's almost nothing you need to do to your house to increase the value. You just put it on the market and it's going to go for top dollar. We still have people who do call us and say, hey, what gets the most value from updates? And quite honestly, the answer is I wouldn't do anything to your house. Just put it on the market. It's going to sell at a ridiculously overinflated price. So we just are trying to be really clear, and we're adjusting less and less because we're seeing condition and quality. It's very tough to extract an adjustment for condition and quality between 5 houses these days. It's really tough to extract an adjustment for 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms to 5, because people are almost saying, we don't care the condition. We don't care the bedrooms. We don't care the bathrooms. We just want a house. We've lost out on 20 other ones. We want this one. We'll figure everything else out. We'll remodel it when we can. So again, to answer Josh's question, I wouldn't say it's causing us to put the brakes on value, just being much more specific on what we're doing and explaining the rationale a little bit more. And hopefully it wasn't offensive to Jane, because I think it is a very, very important question. I just don't think it's really important in this market because quite often people putting money into their homes to try to be the top sell or to get more money out of it, they're finding that those dollars are being eaten up in a sea of offers anyway. So I would say save your money for the next house you have to buy. You're probably going to need it in one of those buckets that Josh talked about.
So, and to address, actually, you kind of addressed what Sheila was asking too. So I don't know if she's on here, but I have a colleague, and sorry about my dog barking. She's practically an appraiser when it comes to listing homes. She is like listing, she collects all of the appraisals that our buyers have and say, okay, and the zip code, and appraiser's giving $2,000 for an extra bedroom, or they're giving $3,000 for a garage, you know. So she's got all, so when she lists a house, she like does it like that. And I'm more like, here's a high range, low range. Let's put it smack down just a little bit less than the middle and see what happens. And it works great. Because to me, the market just decides, kind of, because like, who knows in this market? I have no idea anymore.
I think a lot of agents are using the swag method.
Yeah.
They're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
Agents and appraisers, by the way. I mean, appraisers like to pat themselves on the back and say it's scientific, but I review appraisals every single day from appraisals around the West Michigan area. And you can see when the swag method's being used on adjustments as well. When you see a flat $2,000 for a bedroom, you know that that's a wild ass guess and that there's no extraction from the market. There's no way that you could nail down a $2,000 adjustment for a bedroom or a bathroom. That comes from the pluck from air method that appraiser was taught from their mentor, who learned it from their mentor, that, oh, bedroom, yeah, just give it $2,500, or pole barn, call it 10 grand. Well, that's not what the market does. The market is a little bit more sophisticated, and with enough data samples, you can extract real adjustments from the market, but you need a lot of samples. So, and in this current market with appraisals, again, it's much more important, in my opinion, to do what we call a qualitative analysis as opposed to a quantitative analysis. When the markets are stable and everything is balanced and you've got good data and you've got a lot of comps, you can do quantitative analysis where you can say, hey, look, we sampled 300 houses between 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom, and we found a 4.5% difference between those. And we make a 4.5% adjustment. But nowadays, it's more important to do what's called qualitative analysis, which is kind of like what Sylvia said, where you just go, look, the low end of the comp range is here, and this is what tends to make up the low end. Here's the high end of the range. Here's what tends to make up the high end of the range. Here's comp 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm going to describe them all. And you kind of leave it at that, and you kind of try to derive or extract an opinion of value from there. But understand, even then, one of the drawbacks to the current appraisal methodology is the single point value. And I'm sure Josh can weigh in on this as well. There's one line at the bottom of page 2 that everybody flips to and looks for. And it's the single point value. Did our house appraise or did it not appraise? Mm-hmm. The reality is markets don't work on single point values. They end up at a single point value on each particular house because somebody has to settle on an actual dollar figure. But in actuality, markets work in ranges. So if somebody says, how much is this house worth? I'm not so good. I'm really good, but I'm not so good that I can say that house is worth $437.26. No, I'll say, it's probably somewhere between $410 and $450. Maybe I can tighten the range, maybe I can't. But an appraiser, a good appraiser will, of course, we have to comply with the single point value. But then there will be some commentary somewhere in the appraisal that says, although we've noted a single point value, the range of comparable sales is more appropriate for determining values. It might be slightly below that single point, but it might be above that single point as well. Because there's always a window of value.
Yes, you're going to give them a range no matter what. And like I said, going back to these subdivisions that I develop, we get our Sunday drive-bys, and the price last week was this, and all of a sudden the price is, now it went up 30% or what have you, and buyers are asking me, Why did it jump so high? Well, you know, it's been out there. Lumber prices have went up. I mean, I can't control what the market is doing right now. So even locked in contracts, if these builders don't have something in their contracts, well, guess what? They're going to take that loss. So that's just me. That's what I do is new construction, and that's all. But I feel bad for the realtors out here that can't figure out how to come up with a list price because the demand is there. And now throwing appraisal gaps in there on top of that, you know, they really, really need to know what they're doing. Understand it before you preach it. That's what I tell my agents. And always, always do the pre-title for the forbearances that Josh was talking about. Do the pre-title, and maybe it hasn't even caught up yet. There's another problem.
Yeah, lots of ghost liens potentially out there. And does everybody understand what forbearance is by chance? You know, forbearance?
Our newer agents probably don't understand that concept. If you want to give them the basic.
Yeah, 30,000 foot view. So last year in the CARES Act, when a lot of non-essential workers were laid off and then unemployment wasn't quite keeping up, you know, the mortgage industry really learned something big from 2008 and 2009. And they ultimately learned that they are good at servicing notes or servicing loans. They are not good at dealing with a whole portfolio of vacant houses that get looted, damaged, destroyed, and things like that. So I think if there was ever going to be a crash, it could have been last year when people were not going to be able to stay in their homes. And let's be honest, a lot of our clients do live paycheck to paycheck. So last year, with all the spookiness, when they were forced to, hey, you have to stay at home, non-essential workers cannot go to work, there was forced layoffs and things, the mortgage industry, through the CARES Act, basically came out with this forbearance thing saying, hey, listen, if you call in and are unable to make your payments, you can skip, 4 payments, no questions asked. We'll tack that on the back end of your loan. Really, really smart. Kept millions and millions and millions of people in their home. I think at last count, between 7 and 11 million people across the United States use forbearance. Brilliant. Thankful that we did not have a big wave of foreclosures because that is messy. Takes a long time to go through that process too. So now what we're seeing on some of these refinances is these people have come out the other end. They've received their unemployment income. They're back at work. They're working more. Their hours have been increased to full-time status. And we're doing, some of these refinances and new purchases. And what some of these lenders have done is they didn't just take those skip payments and toss it on the back end. They literally created like a whole different sub-company for second mortgages that are now just starting to appear on title. If you guys own title companies, I'd love to get like a title company in here to start chatting about this, because that's a big deal. And as fast as real estate is turning over, these title companies are checking the box going, all right, first mortgage paid off, that's fine. And if they're not scrubbing deeper on some of these second liens, there could be some big oopses. I mean, if a payment's $2,000 a month, you skip 4 payments, that's 8-10 grand. So, and if they did 2 rounds of that, that's potentially 16-20 grand. So just little things that we have to be made aware of. And this comes down to knowing your client, taking the time over the dinner table, informing the lender of different things that you've heard. We're all a team here. If you catch something that I missed or vice versa, like, it's really important that we, connect with their clients at the deepest level possible to ensure that they have the fastest and most successful transaction possible moving forward. So experienced lenders, super vital.
Awesome. Okay, so it's almost 3:00, and we want to respect everybody's time, and so just the last few minutes, are there any more questions that anybody has regarding the appraisal gap guarantee for either of our guest speakers, for Cheryl, or any other final questions? And while we're waiting for those, Blaine and Josh, I'd love for you to both put your contact information or links or whatever you want to share in the chat for people as well.
Sure. And I'll address, Sheila asked a question about the top 5 things they should be looking at for comps to compare the subject property.
Right.
So without going into too much detail, because you guys are probably pretty good at doing CMAs and things, what I'll just give you is a phrase that we ask as appraisers. Because the appraisal is based on the principle of substitution, what else could we get for the same amount of money, essentially, is when you're looking at what you think is a comparable sale, ask yourself this question. Would my buyer or would a buyer consider this house a suitable alternative if the subject property was not available? Okay, so you're looking at a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonial that's for sale, and you're looking to see what other comparable sales are around. Maybe it's not another colonial, maybe it's another ranch, but then you have to ask yourself, would my buyer consider this a suitable alternative if they couldn't get this 2,000 square foot colonial? If it's on the same street or in the same market, you might actually say, yeah, actually they would, because they're looking for beds and baths, a school system, and they love this neighborhood. Well, that can be a strong argument, even in an appraisal. It's unlikely I'm going to use a ranch against a colonial, but if it's the next door neighbor house and it tells part of the story, we might just use it. But when it comes to apples comparisons, quite often I'm fielding questions and having phone call conversations with agents where they're struggling. And it's because they actually are getting too tight on their range. They're getting too tight on the parameters. They're looking too narrowly at comparable sales, and they will go into a completely different market just because it looked the same and had the same square footage or the same beds and baths. But that's not typically how buyers buy. You have to ask yourself, would my buyer really go 3 miles away just because it's a 2,000 square foot colonial? No, they wanted to be in this market for some reason or this neighborhood. So would my buyer or would a buyer consider this other sale, this comp, to be a suitable alternative if the subject property was not available? That's the best question to ask. And if your heart tells you no, it's a sale, but it's not a comp anymore, you just put it aside and go, well, we'll look at this one later. Or it falls to the lower level of quality of your comparable sales search.
That's good. I like that. All right. I mean, I feel like we could go talk for hours about this whole thing. Cheryl want to know if everybody has a worksheet, and I don't know exactly what you mean. Oops. Like, Cheryl, I do a seller's net sheet or a buyer's net sheet, and I also do multiple offer sheet, but I don't know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, a buyer's net sheet, to include the appraisal gap, I guess. If not, we'll have to create something. Or I just wondered if somebody had something there that they're using. So I don't. There might not be one. I don't know.
I mean, so I don't. When I do a buyer's net sheet. So that's a good point though, because I do have buyers, like I'll explain the appraisal gap guarantee to them over and over again. And they really like, so are we paying that cash or does that come out of the loan? They really don't understand it no matter how many times you explain it. So I like what you're saying though, Cheryl, about putting it in black and white so they can see where is this money coming from? And having a lender like Josh, who, is going to spend time with your buyer to help them understand, because sometimes I feel like I'm in a position where I'm the one trying to explain it. I'm just like, I wish the lender would really explain this better, because they're the money people, and Josh, can you say a few more things about that before we end? I'd like that.
Yeah.
Talk about the money when it comes to appraisal gap guarantees and what.
Talk about the money.
Yeah.
Talk about the money.
Yeah. What they're spending.
So here's something that's hopes has stopped your video.
Sorry about that. You have to start your video, and I apologize.
Oh, sorry. You booted me?
I didn't mean to. I stopped your video by accident.
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
I just asked you to start it. There you are. I apologize.
I'm so sorry, y'all. I thought I got booted for over talking here. Holy smokes. All right, okay, so real quick, down and dirty. If your client is putting 10% or more money down, we can find them more gap. If you are struggling writing offers and winning bids, appraisal gap is on every accepted offer on my desk right now. We've taken a lot of PAs, we win a lot of contracts, listing agents love us, we close quick, great appraisers, it's the full package. So if you have a client that is putting 10% or more down, I can find gap, beat out the other offers, and help your clients win. Bullet point number one. Bullet point number two, we work within the client's budget. If they come to me and say, Josh, my bucket of money is 20 grand, I'll ultimately say, hey, here's your down payment, here's your closing costs, and here's how much gap. Now, if their budget's 20 grand, we may not have a lot of gap to work with, and that's okay. We do not lie. You know, we're not going to say they got $1 million in gap when they don't. But if their budget is more, then we're going to explain that, hey, if they want to put down 15 or 20%, I might run them a payment on a $300,000 house. If it's listed at 250 and they're bidding 300, I'll run a payment on 300,000 with 5% down. That is a worst case scenario payment. Why? Because that is going to have the highest PMI. And I can use that extra money for appraisal gap if needed. Now, when the appraisal comes in, we are having to touch these files more than we ever have because of the current market. Agents are working hard. Lenders should be working equally as hard. So when the appraisal comes in, I revisit their goals sheet. Hey, you want your payment to be this. We talked about it not exceeding this. Here's your cash to close goals. Now, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I've got great news. We only needed $4,000 of the $20,000 gap that you put up. How much money do you now want to bring to close? And then we rebalance the loan file. They might be going from a 5% down to an 18% down. And we re-break down that payment. I talked to a client this morning, bringing about $40,000 to close. We're getting ready to close in 2 weeks. I did a Tuesday check-in call. Hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? Are we taking great care of you? And he goes, Josh, I'm stressing out. I go, buddy, what's going on? Talk to me. If your lenders are not doing this, I'm telling you, you guys are working with wrong lenders. But we caught it. Outbound Tuesday update. Josh, I'm stressing out. Why are you stressing out, buddy? Man, I really only want to put down $25,000, bring $25,000 to close. This $38,000, $40,000 is going to wipe me out. I said, no problem. We're still conventional. No big deal. Here's your new payment. This is what that looks like. How does that feel? And I go, and he goes, oh my gosh, that feels amazing. Thank you so much. I thought I was going to have to back out of the deal. Guys, we need to be checking in with our clients more than ever. People are stressed. People are scared. And the more that we can stomp out the little while, this was just a general Tuesday. This wasn't a panic text. How many of y'all get panic texts at like 11 p.m. at night? 911, call me now. I mean, oh my gosh. We need to be checking in with their clients once a week. We do it on Tuesdays. Every agent, realtor, title company needs to be doing this with their clients. How you doing? How you feeling? Do you need anything? And we were able to stomp out a wildfire. He was literally to jump to the extreme. I'm out. I don't want to buy this house. Too spooky, too scary. You know, everybody gets in their ear. So bottom line, we work with the budget. We work with the cash to close budget. We work with the payment budget. If they're putting 10% or more down, I can find them up to 5% or more in gap. We will help your clients win.
Yeah, that was the question. Somebody said, what does he mean find gap? And I said, he's going to help your client find the money.
Well, and here's another thing too, is that the agents, and I'm going to put the cards on the table here, you have to get your clients pre-approved before you go out looking at these houses and putting offers on them and then adding in an appraisal gap. And now all of a sudden they can't afford that house and they have a legal binding agreement sitting there. So, and then the pre-title is going to come in because now we have those ghost liens, whatever you want to call it, any kind of liens really. Some real estate is owned by LLCs. Let's just make sure we're doing the pre-title so we know who the people are that own it. But I'm going to say, you know, these listings go on the market and they're gone in 37 seconds. Everybody's just too trigger happy to write all these offers. And then buyers don't understand what they're getting themselves into at all. So it's going to come down to get that trusted lender, get them on your list or whatever, and talk to them right away, right out of the gate.
I also think you also need to understand the neighborhood that you're putting offers in on, because you'll know what that appraisal gap is if you know that neighborhood and what the prices are going for in that neighborhood.
True. Okay.
Well,
You guys,
that code of ethics says know your neighborhood, know your area, your market territory. But like Blaine said, everything's a sophisticated wild ass guess right now. Nobody knows, you know, what's going to happen. But when a buyer comes in and thinks that that gap is actually his appraisal or his down payment, now we got a problem. It's all about educating the client.
Absolutely. Okay. And just because it's 3:05, I have to put a stop on everything. But one more time, Josh, can you put your information in the chat, and you can even say it out loud, and same with you, Blaine. And again, I just want to thank you both for joining us so much.
Yes.
Yep. My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Conversation.
Guys, it's a pleasure. My office is here in Byron Center. We serve all of Michigan. So if you're, we have clients in Traverse City and the east side of the state and right here local. Our underwriting's done in Granville, local. Funding is local. We'd love to work with y'all.
Great.
Thank you.
And just, Josh, your phone number is, or your email address is, did you put it in here? Oh yeah, he did. He put it in there. Both Josh and Blaine put in their information in the chat. Just you can even click on save the
Yes.
whole chat to see that. Okay?
Text me. I'm always on my phone. Always happy to help.
Thank you.
So much. Okay, you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely. Blaine, Josh, thank you so much. Everybody who joined us, have a great day. And I'll get these recordings to you guys so you can use them and have a great day.
Awesome. You too, Sylvia. Thank you. Take care.